Thank you, Izzy and Evan over at the booth. I am Connor Cashmore Johnston, joined again this week by the ever so amazing Maeve O'Rourke. And we're here to go over a bit of deja vu really. So I believe we cast over the Arachnids last week, but it's a bit of a different format this time, going with that Series 13.
Yeah, we did actually get to look at the Arachnids last week. I believe that was also our first match of the week last week as well, where we saw the team mascot of Arachnid on the team. However, both the Arachnids and the Castilia Copers are currently tied 3-3. And like Izzy and Evan said just a few seconds ago, this is a really important week for them, right? Because Aloha Arachnids have that one win, which Castilia Copers, I'm sure, are dying to have for themselves as well, just to stay out of those bottom two who will not be able to move on in terms of possibly if they get into that bottom two, won't be able to move on to the playoffs after the week 7 there. So I think it's exciting for us too, Con. I think this is our first Series 13 match we'll ever get to cast together. So I'm excited to kind of see how different this is in comparison to all the Spikemonth matches that we've gotten to kind of take a look at, and even the Series 12 beforehand. I think this will be a little bit of a nice throwback, but also some newer Pokemon in there for the two of us.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of chaos to go through, like I said, those newer Pokemon and the mythical Pokemon. Something that, we had to both check the rules and like the different stats on just before these matches. So hopefully we can get things right as we do see the teams on the screen as well. So, a couple of Pokemon, I think we have seen quite a lot in that Series 12 format. But then we do see on, I believe, KD's side, we see Zeraora, which, has never been seen before. And, it has a couple funky tricks up the sleeve from what I've seen, but I have to see what KD can do with it.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see Katie's team, right? He has the Whimsicott, Groudon, Kyogre, Yveltal, and Zacian. All of those Pokemon are very familiar, but not all at once, right? Whereas Torviv is running the Zacian, Zamazenta, Kyogre, Groudon, Ho-Oh, and Amoonguss there. Katie, though, VR World Cup manager for Jamaica, who was a brand new team in the World Cup this year. Salt Lake City Regional 20th place in a couple of months ago, in the High Roller Draft League top 16. So both great results in real life and online in this online era. Whereas for Torviv, EUIC top 4 this year. That is not something to be ashamed of at all. VR World Cup champions with Spain in last year's World Cup, and the Sinnoh Open top 8 for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl.
Yeah, so a lot going across all the players. Of course, KD having that chance to bring Jamaica into the World Cup scene is kind of showing, a country that isn't often seen, maybe internationally, because a lot of players maybe represent their localities. They went ahead and had quite a strong push. I think they only just missed out on top cut. So hopefully KD coming out through to these tournaments, and then Torviv just having that long roster of event finishes, including BDSP, which is a bit of a practice for those weird and wacky formats that we have got seen in this Series 13 style. So not really one to really ignore given the combination of legendary formats and crazy formats. But I think we could probably see a close battle given that maybe the anonymity of the combinations that could come.
Yeah, and Torviv's team, to me, something that's really interesting about it is you have that double regenerator with Ho-Oh and Amoonguss, and you also have the extra bulk from the Zamazenta, whereas for Katie's team, it feels a little bit more offensive to me, definitely kind of trying to prioritize that speed with the Whimsicott, and Zeraora is also a pretty speedy Pokemon. It's got a really high speed that it can kind of zip around on the battlefield. So I'm sure Katie's probably going to be able to move pretty quickly in comparison to Torviv, unless Torviv has some other speed opportunities on that team. But it's looking to me like maybe he wants to kind of slow it down just with those 6 Pokemon that he's going to be bringing. And the lead for these teams, Torviv sending out Amoonguss and Kyogre, very classic Pokemon lead here, whereas it is the Whimsicott and the Yveltal on Katie's side.
Yeah, so both players going with, what could we say, both a combination of both fast and slow, really. Of course, KD having that instant pressure of both these Pokemon can set up the speed with Tailwind. Maybe you could see even the Cotton Spore coming out from the Whimsicott if it has it. And then we have just the slightly slower but also as speedy pace set of the opposing side. You can Spore the Amoonguss to get that Yveltal to sleep if it hasn't got any safety goggles, and then just start spamming those super strong attacks from Kyogre. But then again, we could see something to stop that, like a Sucker Punch, that could slow down the damage loss, and then forcing into those weaker Origin Pulses or even an Ice Beam just to try and get those super effectiveness on both these Pokemon. But it does ignore that rain effect, and it also means that that the Pokemon can just go on and forth and maybe get taunts off. As you see a Protect though coming out from Yveltal, playing it safe. We could even see a repeat of that Protect if we do not see that. We do see a Tailwind, getting that speed going as fast as possible, avoiding any spores and any spread moves, and maybe just letting the Whimsicott go down to get another Pokemon in on that Tailwind turn.
Yeah, Origin Pulse from the Kyogre won't target into the Protect on that Zacian. Does hit into this Whimsicott. Doesn't do a whole lot of damage, interestingly enough. Amoonguss' Spore targets into that Yveltal as well, so a really nice Protect on this first turn. And also that I think allows for this Whimsicott, now that we can kind of see how well that it took that Origin Pulse, you may have to kind of have the opportunity. We can get a little peek behind the screen, right, with what that Whimsicott is carrying. It has the opportunity to go for Taunt onto that Amoonguss, which I think would be really nice to have in those next few turns. But it looks like KD is going to be starting with a Dynamax with that Yveltal just to start putting on that huge pressure.
Yeah, Dynamax going big is a pressure that's going to be very scary for Torviv. I've seen, from what I've seen of Series 13, it has always been Yveltal putting on that pressure because it does big damage to the Kyogre, does big damage to the Cataract Shadows, which come around a bit, and it also isn't overly scared of Zacian if it can get its bulk right. The Protect coming out for only Amoonguss though stops any shenanigans like the speed boost going through, and this Taunt causes damage would have gone down from an Airstream that did go in that slot, but I do believe the Darkness did come out and go into that Kyogre, and with that Dark Aura boost, it's going to do a lot of damage, but not enough to get the knockout, which you used to see in some of the older formats where, you know, went for that strong physical attack. This Kyogre, a bit bulkier, takes that hit, but does lose a special defense later down the line, and that Origin Pulse does very little damage given the bulk we gained from the Dynamax and the natural resistances of that Whimsicott.
Yeah, getting that special defense drop as well, I think is going to be really nice moving forward, especially if KD has his own Kyogre in the back who would love to make use of this rain. And I mean, there is still plenty of strong physical attackers on KD's team, but any sort of drop that you can get, I think, is going to be really nice moving forward. Whimsicott at this point just needs to get this taunt up onto the Amoonguss, and now that the Amoonguss has it, you have to wonder if it's going to switch into something that may probably even be something like that Zacian that would want to just rather get some big damage off. Goes for a double protect, but does not get it this turn, and that taunt does go off this turn for the Whimsicott into the Amoonguss.
Yeah, the Whimsicott taking that taunt is going to be very annoying because it does stop any potential, you know, spores going off into that Yveltal later down the line, and also force it to maybe go for a switch, which isn't the worst case because, you know, it is a Pokemon that likes to switch. But it is also annoying that you're kind of putting that pressure where someone could come in and take a hit from a Yveltal that doesn't want to take it. Zacian could maybe take some of those hits very well, but the rest of them, not quite as much. If you see the Ho-Oh come in, so something coming in that could maybe have, you know, been a bit scared of those hits given how strong Yveltal is, even in comparison to its bulk. And it can also put a bit of pressure with its own Tailwind, knocking out Whimsicott before it can get another Tailwind up, and also forcing switches itself, maybe something to stop that Whimsicott from going down, the Tailwind to come back later down the line. I have to see how KD reacts to that because it's not the end of the world of that switch in, but it is very annoying given the bulk that Ho-Oh has and the moves that it can throw out onto both of these Pokemon.
Oh, coming out here does mean you have both of your Regenerator Pokemon on the opposite side of the field, so you at least now have this great bulk. You have the opportunity, maybe if you take some damage, you can switch out. If you have the opportunity even to change the weather, maybe take it away from the rain and get an extra boost with something like switching into Groudon if that's the last Pokemon that you have. You know, with this Series 13, it becomes tough to decide which Pokemon in their back, because when it's Series 12, you're like, oh, you have to have at least one restricted in the back, but that doesn't matter when every Pokemon is a restricted, right? However, Ho-Oh looks like it is going to be the Dynamax choice here, and that is a really nice opportunity because Ho-Oh can just be so bulky. It can just be one of those Pokemon that can sit on the field and do a nice chunk of damage, but also if you don't take enough damage out early, if it is able to switch in and out and get that Regenerator, it is going to be something that you have to deal with, especially with its strong special defense. Charm, though, is going to be a great way to lower the attack of that Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. Max Flare from the Yveltal also, even though in the rain, targeting into this Ho-Oh does very little damage, but it does change up the weather here, interestingly enough. So I wonder what exactly that is going to maybe do for KD, unless there was a timer, because I know that Max Flare, that Heat Wave was the first move in the arsenal there for that Yveltal. However, Max Airstream into this Whimsicott, showing that it has that berry there, and it is still enough to knock out even with the berry. That Whimsicott was not hanging on with much HP.
Yeah, I do believe that wasn't an unfortunate tie out there from KD going for that. I think it was a Max Airstream into
Yeah.
Mungus on the very last second. But, you know, it's not the end of the world because, you know, even if it had gone into that Amoonguss with the Max Flare, would have been some nice damage. But Ho-Oh taking that hit is going to be a bit detrimental. Kyogre can come in and reset that weather for what it is really worth. Start throwing off some water spouts into the Ho-Oh, but the Ho-Oh itself is getting those speed boosts, and that Amoonguss is also getting them. And even though it's not the fastest, Torviv could have maybe gone for a speedier Amoonguss to guarantee it got the speed advantage over these Pokemon within 1 or 2 Airstreams, and Ho-Oh can just sit there and be bulky. Maybe it has enough of these to take one hit in the rain. We have seen it as an assault vest on our side. Of course, Torviv doesn't know that, so maybe it's relying on maybe a very small sliver of damage rolls and then just play it out from there. But given that charm as well, Kaiga being weak to those physical attacks isn't going to be as bothered as it normally would be with how strong a Dynamax move is going to be from that Ho-Oh. Because we do see the Groudon come in, it is going to reset that weather, boost any fire-type moves from that Ho-Oh, but again, that charm going to be a bit of a detriment. And Koga not doing as much, so not going to be as scary as we see the Oblivion Wind come out. He's going to get some HP back for the Yveltal and get chipped out on his Groudon and does quite a bit, maybe revealing it's not an Assault Vest variant, maybe one of those variants with a berry to reduce the damage or heal back.
Oh, getting a Max Quake off here. Not too worried about the weather on either side. Max Quake as well going to boost up that special defense because it already was in the face of a Max Darkness that dropped it earlier. However, I think at this point, getting the special defense boost in front of the Kyogre is really what's going to be important moving forward, especially with weather control. Kyogre's Ice Beam also targeted down into where that Amoonguss was. Still does a ton of damage into the Groudon. It's enough to get a full knockout thanks to a critical hit. Yeah, that had to be a critical hit there possibly. And getting rid of that Groudon on the opposite side of the field is great, because now you have weather control and there's only one more turn left of Dynamax for this Ho-Oh to maybe try and exert it on its own. This would be the chance to go for something like a Max Flare, because it's your really only opportunity to do so, because KD would have to switch in and switch out.
Yeah, KD is forced to switch in and switch out to control that weather, and getting that Ice Beam knockout with the crit. A bit unlucky there for Torviv, but absolutely amazing, because as you said, it gives it that pace. It means you have to be scared of the constant revolving door of Pokemon, getting weather in, getting weather out, and just having to figure out when the best turn is. We do see, I believe that as a Heat Wave goes into a Protect, and it goes into that Ho-Oh, again, not taking anything, and just sitting there with a tiny chunk taken out of it. Airstream comes on through into the Yveltal, just to maybe get a bit of damage down there, because Yveltal is one of those equally bulky flying type Pokemon, and it's also going to get that speed boost, so the ball is rolling again, and if we do see a Zoom Shroom, as the players like to call it, it can get those spores off with those speed boosts being shoved onto it.
Yeah, and especially at this point, right? You've already lost the Whimsicott. Your Tailwind, I think, is now done, especially at this point. So you don't have a lot of great ways to kind of keep your speed up, right? That was kind of your main opportunity, was getting a Tailwind and getting some max Airstreams, and then you kind of outspeed the rest of the team. Whereas now, depending on what you have, you're probably going to be slower, right? Because thanks to this Ho-Oh getting those Airstreams, if you have a quick Amoonguss as well, like you said, you have the opportunity to now get some Spores. There's no threat of a Taunt at this point either, but Amoonguss went for another double Protect, interestingly enough. Ho-Oh goes for a Sacred Fire this turn into the Yveltal, looking for a burn, I am assuming, and it gets it. So that burn there on the Yveltal is absolutely huge moving forward. This Oblivion Wing will do less damage as well, I believe, into this Amoonguss, and Amoonguss can pretty comfortably take that at this point. Will allow for some HP to get back for that Yveltal, especially now that it'll be losing some from that burn every single turn. But Kyogre's Ice Beam is still going to be able to do enough damage, I think, to finish off this Amoonguss. Yeah, and Amoonguss getting knocked out only really went for Protects this game, it feels like.
Yeah, it was going for his Protect, maybe just thinking, to keep it around as long as possible, trying to call any speed tiers, or what moves could be going into that slot. And with that Regenerator being gone, being forced into your two Regenerator switching Pokemon, it had really done its job and had to rely on maybe stalling out timer and going for those Spores in the late game. Of course, the burn coming out as well onto the Yveltal didn't help it too much unless it was Cobra Berry, because of course, it was a special move, so it's not getting the damage knocked off of it. And then it just comes down to that place again of timer stalling, finding out the damage rolls, maybe hunting for information for game 2. And now we can just see, both of these moves going strongly into the Ho-Oh, which we see Torviv does choose to forfeit, maybe hiding with a Roost or some sort of damage health multiplier in the back, just playing it slow and going into this game 2 with one game down.
One thing that I think is really interesting, right, for KD that I'm really impressed with is, even though you had a really rough time out during one of your very precious 3 Dynamax turns, it didn't really stop him, right? There was still the opportunity of saying, okay, well, I timed out, I had a Max Flare instead, which then gets rid of the weather that I took the time to set up, doesn't do a whole lot of damage into a Fire-type Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. It doesn't put you in a neutral, at least neutral position, right? It kind of sets you up a little bit worse, which, we have seen the debates on Twitter a million times of what order you should put your moves in, right? And sometimes that's why people say put your stab move first and stuff like that. But I think it's interesting nonetheless of how well he was still kind of able to pilot out of that situation. That definitely is, when you have those 3 Dynamax turns, you tend to know exactly what you want to do with them. And I think at that point it definitely shows the versatility of that team that KD is piloting.
Yeah, the ability to just come back from such a detrimental timeout and just go ahead and win it all. It did come down to maybe Torviv thinking he could be a bit lucky by getting those triple protects and being forced straight away into having both regenerated Pokemon on the field at the same time. And normally in this format like this, where you have these bulky teams, you want to keep looping those Pokemon, getting Weather in and out, and getting the regenerators in and out, and couldn't quite do that. That crit, also detriments, that crit could have been the save for KD. We just don't know. Let's see if there's any different damage rolls going into the next game, and it'll have to be a big decider because if KD takes it, then it just shows you can be lucky, you can have a bit of skill on your side, but also be lucky. So even if you fall behind, there's a win through, and if Torviv can come and do it, then we're going to see a funky, bulky team take over what is a really offensive format, which could be what Torviv is going for, just getting those bulky Pokemon rolling on the ball, switching here, there, everywhere, and just doing damage as and where they can, which could be enough to overthrow this team. As you see, a lead is the double Doggo, Zamazenta and Zacian. They're probably going to be doing some coaching or whatever we could maybe see. And we see the same lead coming out from KD, so both these Pokemon can just put pressure on those Dynamax straight away if it were to happen.
That was really what I was hoping to see that double the Zacian and the Zamazenta, right? Because I think if you put on that offensive pressure first thing, you put yourself in a better position because KD is going to try and go fast. So if you can take those knockouts while KD is taking those turns to set up, then you're going to be in a great position. I think coaching Zamazenta is a nice way to do it. Boosting the attack again onto Zacian and also boosting its defense puts it in a really nice spot. I think especially for the back half of KD's team, especially depending on what he wants to bring. And I think it also kind of leads you into a position, maybe if you're not going to be moving first, then you still have the opportunity. You can click something like a Play Rough even into that Veltal, especially if he goes for a Dynamax this turn. You have a great opportunity to just click Behemoth Blade and maybe a Behemoth Bash on the next turn, and you can just get those double moves that do extra damage onto those Dynamax Pokemon and maybe make KD fear a little bit who they're going to be Dynamaxing. But it looks like Zacian this turn is going to switch out for Kyogre.
Yeah, Zacian's switch out into Kyogre just covers any possible combination of moves. Of course, the Heat Wave being weakened, meaning that the Zamazenta takes less damage, and even if not, the Oblivion Wing would have maybe got a knockout. Zamazenta is unfortunately very bulky and very fragile, when it comes to certain game states. And then you could also put the pressure on with something like a Wide Guard if that Taunt hadn't gone off, and that could have been even scarier. That would have been cool. But the Snarl comes out, so going for yet again a more bulkier option, just reducing those special attack stats. And we see how little that does through the rain, through the Snarl drop, and through how bulky these Pokemon can be. And now KD has to kind of think, okay, how do I break through these Snarls? How do I break through this bulk? Do we try and make the Kyogre slow down in terms of defensive stats? Does it start maybe putting pressure with going for those switches, getting their own Kyogre in and calling out the bluffs on those Snarls? Tailwind is the option though. It's just going to give that bit of speed against these Pokemon already fairly slow compared to the other two, and because we do see the Snarl going first on this side of the field, but the Zamazenta not too worried about that and could just go for its own Snarls over and over again and just hope we don't see a crit. And Torviv could possibly take this if the damage rolls in comparison to the bulk is in their favor.
Yeah, that Water Spout there doesn't do a whole lot of damage, mostly thanks to that Snarl as well. But a Snarl from the Zamazenta on the opposite side of the field, seeing that is exactly the move that it wants to go for, continuing to lower this special attack at this point. You're really preventing this Yveltal from wanting to go for something like a Dynamax. Kyogre doesn't really want to go for one either at this point. So you have to hope that Torviv has brought something in the back that may be a better switch in to try and Dynamax later, or if you just switch into your Zacian and try and prevent something like dealing with a Charm. But if you get this Whimsicott off the field, you're done dealing with taunts and you're done dealing with charms, which is a huge thing on your side. However, Snarl, once again, just seems like it is a battle of these double targeting moves that do very little damage, but that special attack drop really does add up over time. Whimsicott going for a Moonblast this turn as well into the Kyogre that does so little damage.
Did so little damage, possibly revealing Assault Vest on top of those Snarl drops, or just maybe a bulkier Whimsicott variant. And of course, we are seeing, as what you see in these Snarl drops, it does give you that bluff that if we see the Wide Guard, that is one less Snarl going off. And if we do see maybe the Behemoth Bash, that is then putting a knockout on either of these Pokemon. Normally you see it like a 252 HP, 252 speed on Zamazenta with a little bit in attack or either of the bulks. But that should be enough from this range to knock out either of these Pokemon, given super effectiveness, and just, it's got a decent attack stat still, and Snarl isn't really affecting that. So Torviv is in an upper hand in that situation, maybe could be just go for those water spouts and get knockouts from there if the rolls are still going that well. If not, Dashin can come in, it can get its Enchanted Sword, and can easily soak up these Snarls and possibly a Fairy move going into that slot. There's a plethora of options, and Torviv is pretty well controlling it. So to see what comes from that, because these Pokemon have a lot of utilities to them, and unfortunately suffer from having that 4-move syndrome that a lot of Pokemon do fall into. As we do see that the Zacian is coming in on that slot instead of the Kyogre, maybe thinking Kyogre could just take it from here, get a double knockout, or maybe just close enough to get it done and over with.
Whimsicott goes for a taunt onto that Zacian, definitely trying to target back into that Zamazenta. Yveltal's Snarl once again goes off, does finally avoiding that Zacian, but of course Zacian's not the one Pokemon you want the Snarl to avoid on. You would have much preferred if it was that Kyogre who's going for another Water Spout this turn. Into both of these Pokemon, it's not enough to get a knockout on either one, it's getting really close, but those special attack drops are adding up over time.
Yeah, they're adding up over time, and even these Pokemon that don't really often get bothered by them, like Whimsicott, not normally bothered because it often is just supportive, maybe with like Dazzling Gleam or Energy Ball or something, just to cover different Pokemon that you could be scared of. And Yveltal, because it's often seen as such a powerhouse with its ability, often it's like, you get a Snarl on me, I'll just have a physical attack, or I'll just go for these super strong special attack anyway. But living on that bulk as well, just HP, sorry, means that it's going to give them another turn, give her another Snarl, and that is less and less damage going down. Yveltal, I can't really see it not going down to any attack here. And the Whimsicott, it's just going to get sneezed on by this Zacian if it does get to survive a Water Spout. Should it even go afterwards, I doubt it would go after Kyogre, as the opposing Kyogre does come in and then protect as well. So possibly just trying to play around the turns, just maybe stop anything as Quick Attack comes through, goes into that Protect, so good call there from KD. A Water Spout is going to do very little damage to this Kyogre, which I believe is Assault Vest we saw in Team Preview, and it does negligible damage, just under 10 hit points taken. And Torviv, can start switching about, maybe getting the Sun in if he feels like it, but KD then just has that instant pressure of just going for that Ice Beam like last game and going for that double up and just getting a knockout if it is the higher damage roll.
Yeah, I think at this point, right, if you're Torviv, you've let your Kyogre sit there for a pretty long time. You're trying to call getting rid of that Whimsicott, especially because you're sitting in that Zacian. You're either calling for it to go for something like a Charm into your Zacian, or to see if it switches out. Because at that point, too, if it goes for the Charm, you can get the knockout. Then you can kind of switch things around. There's no more threat of a Tailwind. However, Whimsicott can possibly come back in at some point. You can take the knockout on your Yveltal this turn, bring Whimsicott in. Then you have the opportunity to go for another Tailwind. You can allow your Kyogre to stay on the field, maybe go for a Dynamax and get a Max Geyser off this turn just to start getting some big damage off and to reset the weather in your favor without having to wait and maybe go for a switch on your own, or maybe wait for Torviv to switch on their side. And I think this Dynamax Kyogre is probably going to be a great way to try and stop something like this Zacian, who currently can't protect thanks to that taunt it got by switching in on that Whimsicott.
Yeah, it's gonna be scary for those Pokemon that can't protect, as you said, and also it could be scary for the switch in on the Groudon if it does go, because the rain is gonna go back up again. So it's gonna be close. We don't see Iris Pokemon coming in just yet, and the Behemoth Blade will be going into the Kyogre. Kyogre, it can be made bulky with that Assault Vest. But it does still take a lot given Zacian's strength. Not enough to put it in a danger zone, but enough to kind of give it a little wave of the wand, give it a little bit of a fear if it should come across anything, as just the Max Geyser also fails a knockout in return. And I believe the Whimsicott is still in the back to get Tailwind up next turn to kind of counteract any HP that was saved, but is it going to be enough with the Pokemon on the field and what could be in the back? If Groudon's in the back, yes, it's not a complete change of the flow of the game, but it still gives you that one turn of Sun for maybe living something. I doubt the Zacian can live anything from the range its damage is taken, but still lets you reset that Kyogre and lets you reduce the damage as and where it can be sent. So a bit of pressure we put on KD there, but not the overall most pressure that can be put out. And this Zacian as well, no Tailwind is up, so it'll come down to speed ties. But given the bulk we saw Kyogre had, and given how this is kind of a fluid team between bulk and offense, KD's Zacian might take it and just get a knockout in return on either of these Pokemon, given the moves it normally carries.
Yeah, and I think at this point, right, it's interesting that you send in the Zacian because either you have this understanding that your Zacian is inherently very quick, or you are kind of just rolling the dice here. Zamazenta is going to switch in for the Kyogre on Torviv's side. I think that is probably the exact right time to do it. You can now go for something like a Protect this turn on your Zacian if you want to. You may still get knocked out to a Max Geyser in the rain, and that's something that I think you have to be prepared for. Behemoth Blade will target into that protected slot as well. Not going to show, of course, any speed tiers, but Max Lightning is the move of choice that targets into the Zamazenta that was that Kyogre. Is not enough to get a knockout, but I think it's really crucial this turn, even with a critical hit as well. I think it's really crucial this turn that you did not target that Zacian and that Zacian was able to hang on, because now at least you know that there isn't going to be a knockout, possibly thanks to a Tailwind.
Yeah, thanks to a Tailwind, it's going to be a bit of an iffy situation, but not the worst one, of course. Wide Guard, if there is on that Zamazenta, isn't going to do anything to slow down the Kyogre. So it's going to come down to, can I just go for those snarls and get the damage as low as possible? It's not going to affect the opposing Zacian, and it's not really going to do much if there is a super high roll on Torviv's Zacian. So it's going to be close, it's going to be scary, and hope the bulk comes in where it needs to be. The fastest Zacian is on KD's side, and it's going to get a knockout on probably either of these Pokemon. Zamazenta, it will be close on. Zacian is going to take this blade, and it is going to be knocked out to its copycat on the other side. So I have to see what comes from the Zamazenta, if it is fast enough. It is a scary face, something that hadn't been revealed yet, so it's going to slow down the Zacian, it seems. So what could, if we do see a Groudon in the back, it's going to take those hits fairly well because of the Sun Boost, and it is going to do a nice bit of damage in return if it has enough attack investment to knock out the Zacian, if not make it a bit scared where it has now just been slowed down.
Something I think that's tough though is if you have that Groudon in the back and you send out the Groudon on this turn, sure, you haven't used your Dynamax, but you can just swap out that Zacian and send in your Whimsicott, right? You lose that Scary Face drop. You have the opportunity to maybe just take a free knockout on this turn as well. And then at least at that point, you take that knockout on that turn. You can then send your Zacian back in. It gets the boost up. It doesn't have any way to stop it on this turn. Dynamax is over on KD's side at least, so now you have that late game Dynamax that you can use. You can go for the Dynamax with your Groudon maybe if you want to, and just start getting up maybe some max Quakes into that Zacian. It'll boost your special defense against the Kyogre on the opposite side. Get some big damage off into the Zacian as well. You could go for a Max Flare while you have the Sun out, but that is a really easy switch into just send in that Whimsicott this turn, and then you're taking a knockout on a Pokemon that isn't exactly going to do a whole lot, and you've spent a whole Dynamax turn doing it, when you may be better served to just go for something and target into maybe that Kyogre, and then get that boost, and then use your own Kyogre to go for a double targeting move. Even a Water Spout in the Sun is going to be enough to knock out that Whimsicott at such low HP.
Yeah, getting rid of these Pokemon, their utilities, is going to be something Torviv is going to be focusing on. And as you said, the moves can go into any Pokemon on the field right now and still have a benefit to them. The super effective, not even super effective, sorry, the strength of the damage coming out from a Max Quake will be amazing. Unless this Kyogre does go down. You see it does go down thanks to that terrain set up earlier by the opposing Kyogre. So a little bit of a double-edged sword you have there in that Kyogre versus Kyogre matchup, with the electric type being set up if you have got Thunder, because you don't boost any other Thunders or any electric types in general that go into that slot. Whimsicott is going to stand nothing against that Max Quake going down, and albeit you get that special defense boost, it is going to be in front of a Zacian coming in, and Zacian is going to like this Dynamax Groudon, and Kyogre is going to have his water attacks weakened, but given the pace of the game and given the moves they have, it's probably going to be a knockout. Could even go for Thunder to guarantee that high amount of damage, but the rain is not there, so it could miss. So it's going to be scary. It's going to come down to, are these Pokemon invested to take the Behemoth Blade? Are they going to love their trainer and have that nice little bit of accuracy if they do need to go for those accuracy rolls? Lots of things that could happen, but Torviv has this on paper and likely could be seeing it go to a game 3. Thunder comes out and misses though, a little bit of commentator's curse. That's happening again. Behemoth Blade goes through, cannot miss, but we'll see who it goes into and if it is enough when it goes into them. Groudon will be taking this. It goes down to about 70, it takes about 70% of that, and we could just see a knockout from this Max Quake.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking about on the turn prior was that that Thunder into the opposite Kyogre was really risky because you don't have the weather on your side. Max Quake is plenty enough, though, to knock out this Zacian. Does bring us to a game 3 between Torviv and KD. But one thing that was interesting, right, is if you miss that Thunder with your Kyogre, that Kyogre is still alive on the opposite field. It can still get off some damage at that point, at least something into, like, chip damage into that Groudon, and that chip damage may be enough just to allow for the Zacian to get a KO with a Behemoth Blade, and I think that's something that you really were kind of hedging your bets on, which to me was surprising. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because you have that electric terrain up, but if you don't get that full knockout thanks to the electric terrain, then you're still maybe allowing for your Groudon on the opposite side of the field to take something like an Origin Pulse, and then that damage, even with the Sun Up, would be enough for a Behemoth Blade to get the knockout. So it's a risky play, and I'm really glad it paid off for Torviv to help bring him into a game 3. And those are the kind of plays I feel like you need to make when you're in a tournament and you're at that game 2, and you know if you lose, you're done.
Yeah, it's always scary, and GTC players like to put everything in one basket. And oftentimes out of 10, just as long as the commentator doesn't mention it, it's not going to happen. So just make sure you kind of dodge those commentators' words. But yeah, it does come down to that high risk, high reward, and any chip damage, anything coming thrown out would have changed the flow of the game completely. So they were lucky to have the boost from that terrain, the accuracy on that Thunder, and everything going at the well planned, and then not getting knocked out onto the Groudon with the Behemoth Blade, and just kind of going with the flow with the moves that were there. But game 3, we could see everything switch up. We've seen multiple different modes. We could see KD change up, and anything could happen. So it might just be luck on the side. It might just be sheer knowledge of the game state going into it.
Yeah, one thing that I liked about that game too was the switch up by bringing that Zamazenta. I think it does put a lot of pressure on the field. Now that we know that it has Scary Face, I think that it's something that you may feel a little bit more comfortable leading this turn, because you're forcing that Whimsicott to target into it with a taunt, and that leaves your other Pokemon free. It leaves you to still have that speed possible advantage depending on what they bring. Whimsicott Groudon versus Groudon Zamazenta for both KD and Torviv respectively. Again, that Zamazenta, I think it puts so much pressure on that Whimsicott to make the right targeting choice in this turn.
Yeah, the right target is going to have to come down. You could see anything really going for anything here. We still haven't seen a possible wide guard revealed, so that could stop this Groudon in its tracks if it doesn't go for the Dynamax. As for the the other supported mode on the other side in that Whimsicott, if it goes for Tailwind, you're getting that Tailwind up, but is that speed just going to be dropped straight down by that Zamazenta? If you go for Taunt, are you going to eat maybe a Behemoth back into a Dynamax? There's so many different things, and this change up does really force both players to think. You have this possible to go for the coaching if there's no Taunt. Anything and everything could happen. If we see just double Dynamax from these Groudons, then they're going to be these super beefy Pokemon getting those attacks off as fast as they can, and just getting those special defense boosts for those Kyogres in the back, or just putting the sheer pressure out in front of what could be a Zacian. As Tailwind does come out and a Fire Pinch comes out too, will it be enough to get a knockout or burn? Could be nice if it could happen. As we do see the burn, I'm getting all these curses on our players, and if we see a coaching come out, that's going to be really nice, because now we just get some nice strong Precipice Blades coming out, and hopefully they too hit and get the damage rolls, and Torviv could maybe take this as far as possible. See a bulk up though, so it's going to be really good getting that bulk on to the Groudon. So that's +2/+2 already just on turn 0.
Yeah, that burn I think is going to be really helpful for KD, because getting that burn on that Zamazenta, it cannot go maybe to do as much as it wanted to in those next turns. One thing that's interesting, right, is that Whimsicott instead, it had the opportunity maybe to go for a Charm. However, it kind of ended up doing a couple of different things, which I think is something that KD made the right calls on, except for the fact that this Groudon on the other side is also primed to Dynamax, just like KD's is going to be right now. You now have the opportunity to get these Max Quakes up, get those special defense boosts, but we saw the Max Flare. A Max Flare into that Zamazenta is definitely going to be enough to pick up that knockout at this point. You can go for something into the Groudon on Torviv's side, because you know that that's a big threat, but you are a physical attacker. Zamazenta's Wide Guard is not going to be helpful, though, when you're facing down a Dynamax Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. Charm, though, from the Whimsicott into that Groudon is going to bring it back down to that neutral attack stat that it was at, thanks to those -2 drops. Max Quake as well, not worrying about a Wide Guard on this turn. Going to hit into this Zamazenta. That is plenty enough to pick up that knockout, get that special defense boost for maybe a special attacker that Torviv has in the back, something like that Kyogre in the back as well, just to kind of give him a bit of a hand there. And I think at this point, you're forcing Torviv to bring that Kyogre just because of that weather control, and also showing that Life Orb as well on that Groudon. Precipice Blades from the Groudon Groudon on Torviv's side does a nice little chunk of damage to both these Pokemon, but really not too much in comparison to what it would have done without that charm.
Yeah, the charm coming out there on that turn and just getting a knockout onto the Zamazenta meant that the pace was removed essentially from Torviv's side. Maybe thinking, oh, not going to get charmed, I'm going to maybe have the taunt go down to stop a further coaching and just get that hype damage off from the Precipice Blades. And now that it's not gone down, now that there's no real good calls from that turn in terms of where it was going to go, the Max Quake amazingly called into what was going to be a wide guard. It just comes down to the sheer damage output of these Pokemon. An Ice Beam, if it comes out from the Kyogre, could maybe get the Whimsicott if it isn't a super bulky version, but even if not, the Charm is going to be thrown into this Groudon over and over again, and we could just see Max Quake coming out more and more, given we have the Tailwind set up, and just take even less damage from this Kyogre for both of these Pokemon. So KD is in that position where naturally, yes, you'd think, oh, the knockouts will happen from these strong water attacks. We'll just see a Dynamax coming out. Could even be that Kyogre's to guarantee the weather wars are going back and forth, which is something that's come a lot in Series 13, given you have access to a lot more of these stronger Pokemon. But it also just means that you got that little bit extra bulk in case the strong Max Quake comes out and your Groudon goes down, and you have to kind of rely on what goes on that side as the charm does go through. So even less damage coming out from the Groudon, and all hands on deck will be for this Kyogre just to get the damage rolling as Max Quake comes out. And it's going to get a nice little special defense boost. Not that the Groudon minds, but the Kyogre definitely will mind.
Yeah, that Kyogre does take a massive chunk of damage, and seeing that special defense boost on the opposite side of the field is probably not too thrilled about. At least it isn't a Max Flare, right? Because then you still have the full power of this Max Geyser on this turn. It is going to do a ton of damage into this Groudon. It's enough for the knockout, which you definitely needed at this point, because the only thing you're facing down with those special defense boosts is a Whimsicott, and Whimsicott is not going to be happy to face pretty much any move, whether that be a Max Hailstorm, whether that be a Fire Punch from the Groudon on the opposite side of the field. Precipice Blaze is the move of choice here, though. Will connect on into this Whimsicott, even without any sort of defense drop as well. It does, or a defense increase, it does do a very little amount of damage, and now KD gets the opportunity to send in the big Dynamax knockout master of Zacian in the face of this Kyogre.
Yeah, Kyogre is not going to enjoy that Zacian one bit. Behemoth Blade, or maybe a Play Rough could get it from here. Groudon likely won't go down to any of those moves, at least not straight away, given that it's got that bulk up and the coaching on it, still with those defense boosts. But with the charms being thrown out left, right, and center onto it, it's not going to be doing any damage in return, barring a crit, and it can still miss as well, and Zacian can play the long waiting game and get that damage as and where it needs it. Groudon could switch out, but what's the point of switching out in this situation when it comes back in, it's going to have a higher likelihood to be knocked out. With Tailwind up, there's going to be no weird speed ties or weird speed interactions going down over the course of the field. So Torviv is going to have to be scared into what could be done. The switch is a choice, maybe just trying to preserve the Kyogre until Zacian is knocked out, relying on those high rolls from Precipice Blades. His own Zacian will come in, get the Intrepid Sword, puts a bit of pressure on if the speed tie is in the favor, if Whimsicott doesn't get a chance to get Tailwind up later on. The Behemoth Blade does come out to see who it goes into. Optimally, it would have been into that Kyogre, which it does get. It does a nice chunk to the Zacian, and it will come down to if this Pokemon can go down. Whimsicott is going to get its own attack off, goes into the Zacian as well, doesn't get the knockout, and doesn't get any special attacks off, not that'll matter. Precipice Blades will come through as well, and doesn't get that critical hit, unfortunately, and it's going to come, and the Tailwind is going to come straight back up from the Whimsicott. No speed ties whatsoever, and Zacian can just set the pace of this game again and force it to be that Groudon going for those shaky Precipice Blades, relying on every bit of luck possible.
Zacian protects this turn. One thing that was interesting about that Kyogre switching out in the last turn as well is it didn't go for something like a Max Guard. Quick Attack here is not enough to get the knockout onto that Whimsicott before it can get the Tailwind up. Hangs on with just 4 HP. Groudon's Precipice Blades does not go into the Protect on the Zacian side of the field, but it will connect onto this Whimsicott just a little too late. But I think the Kyogre switching out on the turn prior is really interesting because it had the opportunity to maybe go for a Max Guard, and the fact that it didn't go for a Max Guard, I think, means that you can probably make the assumption that it's something like that Assault Vest maybe. Just a little bit nicer bit of confirmation, because if you need that Kyogre later on in the game, it's probably important to have, especially if you want that weather control, because this rain's been up for a while and it's probably going to disappear fairly soon, and you can still send in your Groudon, bring it back out for something like your Kyogre, but bringing the Zacian on this side. The Zacian's not going to be hanging out for too much longer, and this Kyogre comes in instead.
Kyogre coming in does play that bit of a longer game where you can be like, okay, I can reset the sun, I can take less damage in that factor. The protect on the Zacian is good because, you know, you preserve your Zacian for when the sun comes back in, but KD reads that like a book and just goes into that Kyogre, stopping any further switch-ins for the weather and allowing the pressure to be put straight onto that ground when it comes in. Yes, it's going to get the sun up, but again, game 1 and game 2, we've seen how much this Kyogre can do, even with that sun activated, even with like special defense moves activated here, and yet it's just doing loads of things. It's just what Kyogre does best. Groudon forced in because of the lack of Pokemon in the back, and is just, you know, it can go for those Precipice Blades, it can put the pressure on the damage, but will that pressure be enough? As we do see KD just happily clicks moves as quick as possible and can just put pressure on in the same way, opting to maybe double into that Groudon just to kind of rely on it. Quick attack comes through, gonna weaken that Origin Pulse, Walk Spout, sorry, a little bit. Behemoth Blade comes on through, it's gonna go into the Groudon. See how much damage it does. It could be enough to put it into range with this drop, because it's about 50%. And Water Spout can't miss. Both these Pokemon are very low in terms of damage output from Kyogre, and KD goes ahead and takes it. I mean, Arachnids will take this game and one step closer to taking the whole week and putting them a little bit higher in that table and away from that bottom 2 position.
Yeah, really nice play by KD, I think, in this game. Really interesting to kind of see how important that burn may have been onto the Zamazenta earlier on in the game. Something else that's nice as well, if you have this 4-3 lead over the other team, you know at least you've secured points at that point, right? Because you are at best, at worst, you're going to tie. At best, you're going to win the game. And Zero and Positor, I think, still have yet to play. I think they'll be playing maybe later on in the day. So hopefully we'll get an announcement fairly, you know, within maybe the next couple of hours. But they're going to be playing that Spike Myth matchup there for the both of them. I think as well, right? You have this opportunity now. If you are the Arachnids, if you get this win, you've probably, I think, secured yourself from being out of the bottom 2, because you'll have had 2 wins. There are teams that haven't had a single win yet, have just had ties and losses, or they've gotten, you know, 1 win, but if they lose this week, at least it gives you a nicer sense of security, and moving in onto those next few weeks, into those next matches, especially can give you momentum into your next week's match, especially if you're playing a strong opponent, but you had a really good win the week before. It's definitely really helpful to have that motivator in terms of just morale boost.
Yeah, having a morale boost is amazing in these leagues, because every step of the way is something, whether that be learning about your opponents, learning about your fellow teammates, or getting further in the tournament and pushing for that golden trophy at the very end. And like you said, you know, both these teams are so close to getting just that 1 point, if anything, and guaranteeing they have that little bit extra buffering them from them bottom 2. But it will come down as well to how the other teams do and how the rest of everyone else does. And there are quite a few hype games on this matchup sheet that we have here, just to kind of, that could change that pace completely, whether that be at the top of the table knocking teams down, or bringing our 2 contenders just now up a little bit further in the table.
Yeah, absolutely. However, we still have a couple more games left today on the docket, so we will be taking a very quick break. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back with our first Spike Myth Cup game of the day.